What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am joined by a good friend of the show, Rylend Grant. What is going on, my friend?
How you doing?
It's I'm doing well. I was getting nervous there for a while because when I first started doing interviews, I think like I had you on the show like 4 times in like 1 year, and then like
Yeah.
I was like, man, where'd Rylend go? People were like, hey, Greg, is Rylend okay?
No, doing a little too well, I guess, for my own good. I think that's the problem. Yeah. When you and I first started dancing on these things, what I did 3 Kickstarters in a year,
Yeah,
so that is a lot of content. I also probably had 2 books and comic shops over the course of that stuff. Um, so yeah, I'm still doing a lot of that stuff, but my day job, my pesky day job of writing movies and TV shows has been keeping me a little too busy recently. So it's funny. I did those 3 Kickstarters in a year, and it completely wore me out. It's a lot of work.
yeah.
And I got done with the third one, and I was talking on the phone with my stepdad, and he was like, "So when is the next Kickstarter?" And I said, "You know what? To tell you the truth, um, my secret hope is that I am too busy with film and TV stuff to do the next one." And that has kind of been the case for about 2 years. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've been, I Immortal Studios did the Fa Shang Kickstarter, but I didn't run it. And so I haven't been completely dead to the world or this world. Um,
Yeah, because when you first came on, I had you on first for the jump, the first one,
yeah.
and then uh jump two. There was what was the one in between?
It's yeah, called the Peacekeepers. It is a
Peacekeepers.
Fargo-esque crime drama. But yeah, we should just get it out right now,
Yeah,
so we can just plug it, and then we can just talk about
and then
whatever
yeah,
it
because
is.
it's like how many times do I have you on? And go, so what? Tell me about your creative process with.
Yeah,
And what are your Kickstarter rewards?
yeah. But issue 3 of this is issue 1, but issues 1 through 3, I should say, of my paranoid astral projection thriller, The Jump, is available right now on Kickstarter. If you go to bit.ly backslash the jump 3, the number 3, you will find it, or just go to Kickstarter and search for The Jump, or go to my social media and find it. But the quick pitch, again, paranoid thriller set in the world of astral projection. It is Inception meets The Bourne Identity if it were dripping with macabre, and directed by David Fincher. Now that is a pretty cool elevator pitch, if I do say so myself. So go get it.
It's
Great
a
rewards. It's awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
it's a great elevator pitch. I mean, it sold me, and I always say it because I feel like I am. It's in my contract. I'm obligated to say it. Like, gang, that's the first appearance of the bearded comic bro in comic form. Issue
There you
1,
go.
you can see me in all my glory there. And
Yeah,
issue 2, we actually did the
got
cover
your own book.
exclusive, the only cover that we've ever done of the missus and I on that. So that's the jump too. So I
Such a
don't
pretty
know.
book.
It's so good. It's so good.
Sold out, right? Long since sold out.
It's I sold out my allotment I had. I
Yeah,
reserved some because I was just
yeah,
like I knew there was gonna be some that are like, oh, do you? But yeah, it sold out pretty quick
yeah,
because we did a low print run of it.
yeah,
But it was sweet. Like so it's cool. So
yeah. I was glad that I got one. So
yeah, we're
yeah,
always gonna have an effect, a love for the jump. So when I saw the jump 3, when I got that email, I was just like, yes, if Rylan
yeah.
doesn't hit me up real soon to start talking about it, I'm gonna be upset.
Yeah. You were my first call. This is my first I don't know. I mean, this is my first one of these, and I don't know how long. It might be 2 years now. I mean, I had to do a few things that Immortal set up.
Yeah.
I wasn't setting up any of that stuff, but this is my first comic interview. I mean, I do my own show where I do interviews, and we do a roundtable. I should have you on that show sometime. It's called The Writer's Block. I do it with
Yeah.
David Avalone on Pendant Audio, and all your pod dealers. You'll find it. But yeah, this is his first time I've been back. So yeah, what have I been up to? So film and TV was going crazy. So like my day job is writing writing movies and TV shows, and for what, 15 years I got paid pretty well in Hollywood. There's my dog going crazy. To write mostly action movies. I wrote for J.J. Abrams and Justin Lin and F. Gary Gray and John Woo and a bunch of other Ridley Scott, a bunch of cool folks like that. Yeah, so I was getting paid pretty. I was setting my own stuff up and getting paid to write it, but in terms of having my name on stuff, it was. The Hollywood Hills, in LA are filled with very wealthy screenwriters who never had their name on anything. And I know that seems kind of terrible, but it was really hard to get my own stuff made for a really long time, and then COVID hit, and nothing was getting made, and it was maybe the worst time ever to try and do this stuff, and then I don't know, like ironically, like paradoxically, I don't know what word you want to put on it, but COVID hits, nobody's getting anything made, and then suddenly I have 3 movies in production, and so had this sci-fi thriller shot in Italy with Emile Hirsch that is pretty cool. This sort of twisted sci-fi mindfuck, Black Mirror-esque sort of thing that's pretty cool, and that'll be out later this year. Did a really cool film that was shot in Greece with Matt Dillon. That was directed by the Spanish director Fernando Trueba, who won the Oscar for foreign language film a few years back with Bella Polk.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then have a third film shooting in Germany before the end of the year. That's really interesting. Also about these takes place in East Germany in the late 70s when American music, Western influence all together was outlawed, and it's about these college kids that find a sort of trove of American rock music and sort of changes their lives. And so yeah, pretty cool. It's a lot of stuff. And
so let me ask, if you don't mind, you go into detail as you can and stuff. For me, I've had you on the show, and I know you've done a lot of screenwriting and things, and you mentioned all those names earlier. Like, what, for those of us who aren't in the kind of behind the scenes of aspect of screenwriting, where's that process or figuring out of like when you get called to like help out write a screenwrite, where you don't get the credit with like a J.J. Abrams and stuff like that compared to like your own stuff?
Well, so little gets made these days, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I mean, like a big movie, a big movie that JJ makes, they might have 10 writers polish it up. Generally the first writer on it, the guy or gal that, I don't know, kind of lays the groundwork, they get credit. And if you have contributed 25+% after that, then maybe you'll also get a credit, but it's tough.
Yeah.
So early in my career, a lot of my stuff was coming in and polishing up people's turds. I mean, I've rewritten a lot of movies that you've seen. I made some good movies a little bit better. I've made some shitty movies a little bit more tolerable. There's that. So there's that part of the work. I mean, the other thing is, again, just so little gets made. I mean, when they're making, I don't know, maybe like a quarter as many films as they were like 5 years ago. They're making bigger bets. When I first got into the business, they were making mid-budget movies. They were making movies that cost 10, 15, 20 million dollars. Now all these studios are run by these big conglomerates, and so making or losing $10 million on a movie it's the same as making $10 million is the same as losing it to them. It barely registers. There's this old this oddly cliched story about Bill Gates where it's like he makes so much money every couple of seconds that if he was walking down the street and he saw $100 bill, it would actually cost him money to stop and pick it up off the ground. And so with these big conglomerates, it's a similar thing. So they measure success in hundreds of millions of dollars, but now really billions of dollars. And so rather than make, I don't know, 20 small movies and try and let that add up to something, they place one huge bet and try to make $1 billion movie. And so that's how it is. So a lot of the stuff I wrote early on in my career kind of got killed by that. You sell a script for a bunch of money and people are excited about it, and if the right talent doesn't come around it at the right time, even if it has everything going for it, then that can kill it. and people don't like to come back to stuff in this town for some reason. You know, it was like this yesterday, this is the greatest script ever. Now, like, because of a scheduling conflict, it didn't get made when it was supposed to get made, and so now it's kind of old and dusty, and we don't want to deal with it anymore. So there's that.
Yeah.
Also, it takes time. You know, I mean, the other thing I have going on is I just sold a TV show to Lionsgate. You know, so it's with the studio now. And it's a kind of this big bad John Wick, you know, John Wickian martial arts show
All
that's
right.
really kind of like a modern reimagining of the County Monte Cristo. We have Daveed Diggs, who was one of the stars of Hamilton and was the lead in
Yeah.
the Snowpiercer series. We have Rafael Casal, who created and runs and stars in the Blind Spotting TV show and the Blind Spotting movie, and he is the one of the principal villains in this next season of Loki. And then we have Emmy Raver Latman, who is the one of the stars of Umbrella Academy on
Oh,
Netflix.
cool.
And so those are our three leads, and you know, we have some other people that we can't quite talk about it or announce yet. But we're having all the network conversations now. We have one outstanding offer, but we're you know, all the emails were coming in today. You know, we're meeting at Netflix, and we're meeting at Apple TV and Peacock and all these places. So we're just figuring out where. I mean,
Right.
sold it to the studio. We're figuring out who's going to air it now. And so, but you know, that took. We've been working on that for 5.5 years now. And so we sold it to a production company 5.5 years ago. They paid us pretty handsomely to write a movie based on that, you know, based on this premise, on this world. And we sort of built it out with a couple of the actors. And then the business has changed so much over the course of 5 years that TV was really the place to kind of take it. And so then they paid us again to reimagine it as a TV series. You know, it's just funny because it's like, I mean, we wrote a pilot and we sold the pitch and the pilot to the studio, but now the studio's like, oh, well, I think that having a pilot will actually be difficult, make it more difficult for us going into the networks because then things are too set in stone. So let's pretend that the pilot doesn't exist. And so we're going into these studios, and I mean, you know, into these networks, and the network is going to buy it, and then they're going to pay us again to write a pilot. So,
Like, well, here we go.
yeah, that'll probably be, you know, it'll be different in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But so this stuff takes so much time, you know. And so I mean the film in Greece that got made is like the ultimate story, because that was actually the first thing that I ever got paid to write in Hollywood. So I was like a 24-year-old kid, and I'd won the final draft big break screenwriting competition. It was maybe the second year of the competition. It's a huge competition now, but it was maybe the second year, and it was still a big competition because it was final draft. Final draft
Yeah.
is like the writing software, you know. And so it was kind of a whirlwind after that. I ended up repped at CAA, which is like the biggest agency in the world, and they set you up with all these meetings, and so they sent me into Penelope Cruz decided that she wanted to make this movie that was a remake of a Claude Chabrol film called L'Enfer. And so I was 24-year-old kid, and it was my first pitch in Hollywood, and I had to walk into the Chateau Marmont and pitch to Penelope Cruz. And it was like it was like a cattle call, sort of, you know. I mean, when these agencies do these things, they send, you know, they'll send 10, 15, 20 writers at it. And
is that is the Chateau, is that like that, is that the like main restaurant kind of vibe in LA, or is that
I mean, the Chateau Marmont is it's a hotel.
okay.
It's a pretty fancy private hotel where all of the I think it's where Belushi died.
Okay.
It's where, you know, like Lindsay Lohan lived there for years, and like it's a really Hollywood place, right?
Gotcha.
And it's back in the hills, and it's pretty fancy, but yeah, so they, you know, they sent all these writers at this thing, and it was a lot of like older, more experienced writers, and so, you know, I'm this 24-year-old kid who's still in grad school, and I just kind of walk up in there, and you know, I'd written this really dark script. It was a script that won the competition. It was my writing sample, and it was what she read. And I walked in and she's like, wow, I expected you to be older. This script was like so dark and so twisted. And so it just, she expected some grizzled, like 45-year-old man to walk through the door with a beard and, crazy eyes. And, it was this kind of baby faced kid. And, I mean, the way she tells it was, so all of her meetings lasted, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or something like that. She was trying to get through a lot of them. And then she and I sat down and we talked for like an hour and a half. And we just really hit it off. I mean, we barely talked. I had a pitch ready. I didn't really give it. We sort of barely talked about the movie.
Yeah.
We mostly talked about life and what was important to us, and I don't know, current events and art and movies we liked, and we just kind of hit it off as people. Yeah, she told me right at the end, she's like, yeah, I think you're the guy. So I sort of sold it in the room, and then she put me with this director, Fernando Trueba, who Trueba was actually the guy who discovered Penelope back in Spain.
Oh, wow.
She was like a she was like a soap opera actress or something like that nobody knew about, and he put her in this movie and made her this big star. And so they were getting back together on this. So this was supposed to go back then. This was supposed to go, I don't know, 2008 or something like that. And we had Penelope, we had Billy Bob Thornton, and they were going to do this movie. And then the writer strike happened right around the time that the financial crisis happened, and all hell broke loose in Hollywood. And suddenly things got categorized into pre-strike films and post-strike films. So if you got a film into production before the strike, you could continue to shoot it, right? If it didn't start photography or prep before the strike happened, then according to union rules, you couldn't shoot it. So people were scrambling, man. They didn't know how long the strike was going to last, and so they just rushed all this stuff into production. And so we were set to go, but we couldn't get off the ground probably before the strike. But more importantly, studios were just tossing like silly money at people like Penelope and Billy Bob to do, whatever. Like, I think Penelope got offered like $12 million to do Sahara 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of money at any time, but in 2008 that was a shit ton of money, especially for an actress.
Right.
And so yeah, so it was like, oh well, we kind of have to take these paychecks now, and so we'll come back to this. And I mean, to get like an A-list European director and 2 A-list actors together
Yeah.
to do something is tough. And so it kind of never happened. And then COVID hit and people had time to think, and I got a call from the director, and he's like, hey, I think I want to do this now. I think I want to shoot it next year. This was a year or two ago. And he's like, yeah, I've been talking with Matt Dillon about it. You should sit down with Matt. And sat down with Matt, and we hit it off about as well as Penelope and I did. And so it was off to the races. And so yeah, I spent a couple of weeks in Greece with the director, just kind of whipping the thing to shape. I mean, we imagine this Greek island in our minds, sitting at a restaurant in LA writing this thing,
Right.
or we wrote in Mallorca one time that the director has a house there. It's a island in the Mediterranean, a Spanish island. But then you get on set, you see the actual set, you see the actual like little Greek island, the Greek town, and it needs to change, it needs to come to life. But that worked both ways. I mean, it was like you're imagining this. I mean, we imagined this 15 years ago, like thousands of miles away, and so it can't possibly match. The place can't possibly match what you thought. But then in certain ways it does, like in a really weird cosmic way. Like I remember most of the movie takes place at this restaurant. It's a restaurant on the water, and we wrote this scene where he steps out of the kitchen onto this deck where a lot of the dining is, and then he turns to the left and he steps off, and there's like a chicken coop here, and there's this thing going on there, and it's just very specific, right?
Yeah.
And then I see the location for the first time, and I step out of the restaurant onto this deck. And that's not totally crazy because we were looking for a restaurant on the water with deck seating. But then I step off to the left, just like in the script, and there's a fucking chicken coop right there. And there's the outhouse that we wrote, and it was just like, oh my God, what happened? Like we sort of manifested this place. So that was cool. But yeah, so that was a very long-winded way of answering your question. Is it there's a lot of stuff gets bought that doesn't get
Yeah.
made. A lot of people get. I mean, I I'm good with dialogue. I'm good with little twists, and so a lot of directors call you in just to kind of punch things up, and then the stuff that you sell and that you're championing, that's yours. Sometimes it takes 5 years or 15 years to get made.
Yes.
So I got a lot of stuff that is still in the pipe, and we'll see. I mean, for JJ, I mean, we wrote this really amazing. I say we a lot because my film and TV stuff. I read a lot of it with a partner, this guy
Okay.
Tigran Arnekian, who's a really great guy. But we wrote this really cool thing for J.J. Abrams that was about a penal colony on an alien planet. Um, Basically, this guy's marooned there, and he has kind of the key to a conspiracy back on Earth, and he's trying to fight his way off the planet and get back to to solve the problem, to fuck shit up. And that was pretty close, and then JJ decided that he wasn't going to re-up his studio deal, that he was going to look elsewhere. And so and then everything's in question. Is this coming over to the new studio? Will the
Right.
old studio let go of it? The old studio is going to keep a hold of it, but JJ's not involved anymore. In name only, I guess. And so, is it going to go? Is there going to be a JJ gets this made, but do any other directors get this massive thing
Right.
made? No. And so it's always caught up. I mean, the number of times that we have been on the 2 yard line with a massive project.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think I can count them on my hands anymore. I would need to grow another hand to make an accurate assessment.
So I mean that just has to drive you to, like, you have to have the passion to do what you're doing, then, of like you said, you're up so close to the end zone so many times that, and it's not even like someone doesn't like it, or it's like you don't like it, just is like all the things that have to fall in place to make it work, that even then when they do, it's like, dang it.
It's like lightning striking. I mean, here's the thing: is it gets easier after a certain point.
Yeah.
If you're J.J. Abrams, you can make whatever the hell you feel like, whenever
Right.
the hell you feel like it. But how many of those guys or gals are there? Um, you know, I would love to say when, but when and if this TV show goes, we're going to be in a pretty good place.
Yeah.
That TV show comes out, and then getting the next one done is easy. But otherwise, yeah, it's a lot of. I mean, 99.9% of the people here working in Hollywood are it's Sisyphus. You're pushing a giant boulder up the hill constantly, and then it rolls back down. You got to start pushing again. That's tough. But here's the thing: is like that's 99.9% of the people that are working.
Yeah.
Only 1% of the people who are here trying to do this are actually working. You know what I'm saying? So it's even tougher than that. I mean, all that said, it's a really tough way to make a living and to feed your soul. You can get chewed up and spit out, but here's the thing: is like it kind of beats working. You know what I'm saying? Like I have friends who have real jobs, who work very hard, who drive trucks and make big business decisions and help children and save lives and all of those things. And yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm built for that, and so, and again, there are a lot of people that want to do what I do, and I get to do it, even if it hasn't gone completely perfectly.
Yeah.
Most of the people getting off the bus, here in LA would change places for me. So it pays pretty well. That makes it go down a little more easily. But yeah, I mean, at some point you want to see your the stuff you made
Right.
on a screen or something. I mean, to tell you the truth, I mean, that was where we might have talked about this before, but that's how and why I switched. Now, I didn't switch to comics, but started doing comics on the
Right.
side. Was because I had for so many years. I mean, I would create these beautiful stories, amazing characters, and I may sell them for a bunch of money, but then if they didn't get made, I have amazing stories that people will never see that are still sitting on a studio shelf somewhere. Um, but then you get into comics and you write something down, you give it to an artist, and you have, layouts. You have pages back in a couple of days.
I mean, I've done interviews enough, so like I hope this doesn't come off as a knock or anything, but like it makes sense that you were a screenwriter because every single comic that we've talked about, The Jump, Peacekeepers, Suicide Jockeys, like those I'm like, oh, those could be a movie or a TV show through and through. Like, it feels like I'm reading a movie or a TV show. Like, I don't think you can always get that with a comic where like you can see a comic and like I could see that on the big screen or on the small screen. There are some comics that I love that I'm like, I don't see how that would ever work there. So like,
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't come off as a knock, like that your comics will work for TV or movie, but it does.
No. I mean, in fact, I go out of my way to give a cinematic experience. I mean, it's, I mean, comics and movies can be, and I would almost go so far as to say should be a very similar experience. I mean, it's visual storytelling. I mean, I went to grad school at the American Film Institute and studied directing. That was where Aronofsky went and David Lynch, and so I have my snooty film education. I think all my comics still say, maybe we can see it. I think it says writer director. It still says written and directed by Rylend Grant. That pisses a lot of people off, but screw them. And my first book, Aberrant, available in fine comic shops and on Amazon. I was purposely trying to make a very cinematic experience, and the first bubble is actually a music cue. The issue is titled "Don't Worry, Be Happy," and so the first thing you read is the lyrics to Bobby McFerrin's "Don't Worry, Be Happy." Somebody's singing it, and so I think there are 5 songs in the first issue, and it works as a soundtrack. They're these ingrained songs that we all know, and so you see them on the page, and you just start to hear them, and
you got the opening credits going right there.
Yeah, and so we sold Aberrant as a TV show, probably I think it was 2 weeks before the second issue hit comic shops. I was sitting in a room with a bunch of executives who all had the first issue in their hand, and they were like, "Man, it just feels like a TV show," just from panel one. And so I take that as a compliment. I think that you're saying some version of the same thing. I mean, it's the worlds are so intertwined now.
Yeah.
And you have to know how to. I mean, there are a lot of bad graphic novels that were failed screenplays, and that's something I've never done, was just taking some like shit screenplay I had sitting on the shelf and turn it into a graphic novel. I mean, I mean, those first 2 books, I mean, this is kind of my, I mean, Aberrant and Banjax were they were me processing, a couple of decades of reading comic books. I mean, this is almost my Captain America story, and this is almost my Batman story, and they're twisted, crazy versions of those things. And since then I've really kind of started creating my own worlds and whatnot, rather than doing this, referential stuff. But yeah, the worlds are so intertwined. I think that you sort of ignore that at your own peril,
We've talked a lot about what you've been doing, work-wise since you've last been on the show, which is a lot. And I think it's really cool for the listeners because, like I said, I've had you on a lot. You were my first ever interview, and then I had you on a lot because I was just like, Rylend, please talk with me.
No, you're every time I have something to talk about, you're my first call. I enjoy. I mean, your audience is awesome and very engaged, and just fun. But you're a good hang. I like hanging out with you. So yeah,
I feel like I had Mark Russell on the show for like the 3rd time around. It's like, okay, I better step it back up. I better get back on the show so Mark doesn't take over my spot.
Yeah.
What have you been doing since we've talked last that isn't work related, comic related, or it can be, but good. Like that you're not working on? Like what have you been doing to unwind?
That is a really good question. I have a really good answer, I think. And we didn't compare notes on this before or anything. You're just firing away, and I have one in the chamber, one in the holster here. So it is probably because two things. So I have been writing this Fa Shang Origins comic book, which is a wuxia comic book. For the uninitiated, wuxia is the Chinese martial warrior genre, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. These sort of magical kung fu movies. And so I have been really steeped in martial arts because of that. My TV show, as I said, has a lot of martial arts because of it, and so because of that, I've sort of fallen in love with martial arts. Did it a ton when I was a kid, and sort of fell out of it. When I went to college, I actually, I fenced in college, so I was competing and fighting in a different way. But yeah, I started to feel the itch again.
Mm.
And it was partially also, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and she fell in love with Karate Kid, which is my favorite movie ever. You and I have talked about it. She's seen Cobra Kai backwards and forwards over and over again. And so she decides at some point, hey, Dad, I think I want to take karate. And so whatever she's interested in, I try to throw her in the water, and see if she likes swimming in it. And so I start scouting, dojos around the area for my daughter. I see a couple, and they're all great in their own way. But I walk into this one, and it's literally around the corner. It's like 3 minutes away. I could almost walk there. And I never expected to find this incredible dojo so close. You start reading on the internet, and it's like, this place is the best place to study Aikido, and in the Western world, and but you have to drive downtown for it, and I'm like, well, maybe we can do that, blah 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 blah. And I just sort of, like, on a lark, wander into the one around the corner. It's a Kempo dojo, and the space is gorgeous. Huge, and you don't have a lot of huge spaces in LA, but huge and amazing. And then I meet the sensei there, and he's he's this older guy, he's late 60s, maybe 70. But this guy Mark Arnott, who, if you look him up on IMDb, he's one of these guys with 100 credits. He was an actor. Of course, everyone in LA is an actor one way or another, right? But one of these guys, like, really accomplished stage actor, and studied with Stella Adler and all that stuff. But also, just in TV, he was one of these guys. He was like that guy in the 70s and in the 80s and the 90s. And he was one of these guys where it's like, if there was a great show, he had his episode. He played a dirtbag in Hunter. He had his episode of Columbo. It was that thing. And the kicker for me, one of my favorite shows ever is Cheers. Growing up, my family was weird. My dad owned bars and clubs my whole life. My parents were divorced. I would watch these family sitcoms, and it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't recognize my experience in those things. But Cheers, this, it was about a non-traditional family. These people, they gather at a bar, and they talk, and that looked like my family, like my experience. So I fell in love with Cheers. But this guy, Mark Arnott, the sensei at this dojo, spent a couple of seasons as a barfly, in Cheers. And he wasn't Norm or Cliff, but he was like the guy that sat next to Norm and Cliff. and so again, another one of these things where I expect to pop in for 5 minutes and check the space out, and get a price sheet, and I end up talking to this guy for an hour, and fall in love with the place, fall in love with him, as a teacher, as a person. And I'm like, what? I came in here to get like a price list, for my daughter. I don't think I can walk out of here without signing up for a month. And so I signed up for a month. And man, I took to it, like a fish to water. It was just perfect. It was exactly what I needed. It was exactly what I needed to unwind. And so I've been like strapped to the head of a rocket with it ever since. And
did you sign up your daughter too, or did you just like, no, forget about it, I'm doing it now?
Yeah. It's a little more complicated. We're still figuring out the thing with my daughter, but yeah, she's she's working it out. so yeah, so I'm, I'm in, and but then also I'm, I'm teaching younger students now. I'm doing private lessons. I just had I just had one of my students earn his brown belt, and that was pretty amazing to see him actually test with all the techniques I taught him. And then you caught me at a good time, because on Saturday I did a point fighting tournament for the first time since I was probably 15, and just sort of did it on a lark, and I
Look at that.
yeah. So yeah, it's funny. It's not like I just had it sitting over here because I just brought it back home. My gear bag's down here. Um, so yeah, what do I do to unwind? I go to the dojo and I teach kids, and I beat up, you know, 25, 30 year olds, and
As you should. All these 25, 30-year olds are like, I want to try karate now because of Cobra Kai. We're like, I am Cobra Kai, okay? You're like giving a Bane speech. Like, I was born in the darkness. I was born in Cobra Kai. And I didn't just come, man, that's so cool.
yeah. So I told you I have one in the holster, but yeah, so it's and it's I mean, it's been great, but it's really informed my it has informed my my writing in a really interesting way on these two things. I got hired on the Fa Sheng thing because I'm a Zen monk. One of the weird lines in my bio that doesn't get talked about a lot is that I am an ordained Soto Zen Buddhist monk. Basically means I've been doing it for a while, and I'm a meditation teacher of sorts. But Soto Zen is Japanese art, but it can be, you can I when you're ordained, you get a lineage chart. Like, the teachings were handed down from this person to this person to this person to this person, and then there's you at the bottom. Well, I can trace my lineage all the way back to the Shaolin Temple. Fa Sheng is about happenings at the Shaolin Temple at around 1900. So with that story, I'm kind of exploring a really specific link in my my lineage.
Yeah.
Kempo karate is a similar thing, where you can actually trace the lineage of Kempo karate back to the Shaolin Temple. So Bodhidharma brings Buddhism from India to China, and when he does it, he brings it to the Shaolin Temple. The monks at the Shaolin Temple, when he arrives, are out of shape. They're in need of assistance, and so he teaches them a series of exercises that eventually kind of marries with stuff that's in the region and becomes Shaolin Kung Fu. But probably hundreds of versions of Shaolin Kung Fu end up created in and around the Shaolin Temple. And so one of those versions goes from the Shaolin Temple and makes its way to Okinawa. We all know Okinawa from our Karate Kid and our Cobra Kai, and it marries with stuff that's going on there locally and becomes something different. And then that art gets taken from Okinawa to Hawaii and becomes something very different, and eventually becomes a guy named Ed Parker turns it into what we now know as Kempo Karate, American Kempo Karate. And it's cool because it's kind of like me. It's something that is like 100% truly, unapologetically American, but it also has all of these roots spiritually from somewhere else. And Kempo is cool, man. You look at the history of Kempo, and it's like, Elvis was a Kempo black belt. Ed Parker actually wrote a book about he was like one of Elvis's closest friends for 20 years, 25 years. He wrote a really cool book about it. You can find it. It's called On Elvis by Ed Parker.
Well, I want to now because I just watched the Elvis movie, and so now I'm like, that's how I am. I consume whenever I see something or watch. I'm like, now I want to consume it all. Like, as soon as this is over, my wife's gonna be like, why are we watching Cheers now? I'm like, because one of the characters is Rylend. She's like, I'm like, just go with me. We're watching it.
Yeah,
that's what I do.
Well,
so
yeah, well, it's time well spent. I mean, I think that Cheers. I mean, but for the haircuts and the clothes, it could have been written yesterday.
Yeah, it's so cool, and it's so funny how like our my connection with karate and stuff has been connected with you because of your love for it. We talk about it every time that you're on. You've shown your VHS collection of all your Karate Kids from all over the world.
Yeah.
Which is there's which I saw someone on TikTok. I'm like, this should be Ryland. He literally just has people send him VHSs of Titanic.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, so yeah, the guy. Yeah, he has thousands of them. Yeah, there's that guy. There's the Point Break guy that does that same thing.
Does he? Okay.
The original, I believe, is there is a guy who collected, like, I don't know where he's at now. He's up to 1,000 or something like that. But he collected Super Mario Duck Hunt carts, and people would just send them to him. Yeah,
I need
he
it.
has like a wall of them. Yeah.
I need to get into that. Like you said, Point Break. I should have brought the beer I sent you one time a picture of the Johnny Johnny Utah beer that the local place brewed it.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I still you can see it right here. Maybe I showed this on the show before, but this thing right here is that is Patrick Swayze's People's Choice nomination certificate for Point Break. One of the weird, Hollywood fits that I have.
You're we've talked about I think like the second time I had you on or something, we kind of did a tour of your shelf. Like that is like your room would be something I'm like, I want to watch. That's a TikTok I want to watch. Just like 30 seconds of like the obscure, like this
Yeah,
is this is my Golden Girls skateboard or whatever. It's just like,
yeah,
yeah, you
yeah.
have it all.
There is so much. Yeah, I mean, it's if I assume most people are watching it on video, but it sort of goes on and on and
Yes.
on and on. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
it's a lot of toys and a lot of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it even goes up to the top, but yeah, I mean, there are a lot of gems in here.
It's so good. It's so good. I mean, we gotta talk though. We just got news. It was season 6, final season of Cobra Kai.
Yeah,
How you feeling?
yeah, it's going to be weird it coming to an end. I mean, I think all things have to come to an end, and the worst thing I think anything can do is overstay its welcome. You know, almost better to leave them wanting more.
Right.
Um, you know, I think about you ever watch Sports Night? The first
So
Aaron
good.
Sorkin show. Yeah,
So
it's
good.
yeah, so good. And it only went 2 seasons, and I think we remember it as so good because it only went 2 seasons. I mean,
Right.
if it had gone longer, who knows?
Well, because
Um,
yeah, Sports Night was basically, if you haven't seen it, gang, y'all need to watch it. It was a ESPN basically, you know, show that they document. Like that's what like Aaron Sorkin does that. Like that he did with Sports Night Sunset on Studio 60. Like
yeah,
it, but man, there were some episodes in that were just like so good. So yeah, I'm curious about that. Of like, yeah, if it was longer than 2 seasons, I'm like,
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Aaron Sorkin ended up, wrestling with a lot of addiction issues shortly after that. So I think that maybe he would have, I mean, West Wing had a really tough go for a couple of seasons there
right.
until it kind of found its footing again. But yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing with Sports Night, I mean, so it is. It's a workplace dramedy, I guess.
Yep.
Which dramedy is always a weird word. Is it a comedy or is it a drama? That's weird with network audiences. But it was, it was a really smart. It was a really smart show, that was behind the scenes of Sports Center. So like, the heady crowd, the intellectual crowd, avoided it because they thought it was about sports, and then the people that tuned in thought it was about sports, and then they got there and it was way too heady for them, way too intellectual, and then they were all turned off. And so it was like I mean, it would have been the perfect, this was before prestige television, right? So it would have been the
Yeah.
perfect thing for HBO, like, now or a couple of
Yep.
years ago. But it was sort of ahead of its time there. But yeah, so yeah, this sort of feels right with Cobra Kai. I mean, it's I think it's been made clear that this is not the end of the universe.
Right.
They'll probably find a new show to set in there that has a different. But I mean, how I don't know, how many more feuds can you have between two dojos and stuff
How
like
many
that?
re-team ups and
Yeah, and people changing sides, and I mean, I love it. But and they've I don't know, they've had these really kind of, I don't know, sort of beautiful and poetic homages to the original films,
yep.
and there's a little left to do. Um, but but I don't know how much there is. You know, I think Overstaying Your Welcome is I mean they you know, they obviously, I mean they did Karate Kid Part 2 really nicely 2 seasons ago.
Hmm.
And they sort of continued that, you know, into this next season. Karate Kid 3 got its due this previous season, uh, with our boy Sean coming back
So
and
good.
yeah and all that. So yeah, I mean, I wonder. I mean, I mean, hopefully we see Hilary Swank this season, and all will be right.
All will be good. So it's funny because we both have gotten to have Sean on our
Yeah,
interview shows. Who is someone? This is a two-parter for you. Who
yeah.
is someone from the original cast that you would love to interview, whether it's on the writer's block or just interview and talk to about stuff? And then who is someone from the new series that isn't part of the original that you would
God.
talk with?
Yeah. I mean, can I? I mean, can I go, Mr. Miyagi?
Yes, yes. This is like yes, yeah. If Mr. Miyagi would be a perfect choice, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard to. I mean, Pat Morita is I think just an amazing and interesting person, and that role so important to me for a number of reasons. I mean, I didn't have a lot of people. I probably talked about this on your show before, but I didn't have a lot of people. I grew up in a housing project in Detroit, and my family situation, my supervision situation was a little bit weird, and so I didn't have a lot of people teaching me right and wrong when I was growing up. And Mr. Miyagi was one of the first people who sort of taught me right and wrong, and taught me, I don't know, what to value and what to sort of seek in life, right? And it was bigger than him in a way. I mean, it was those movies, and it was other movies. I mean, it was Jean-Luc Picard, and fucking Action Jackson, and and Rocky, but it was, I mean, he really sums it up. So it would be nice to sit, but then also it's such an interesting cultural story.
yeah,
I mean, there were not a lot of Asian actors that were being treated seriously in Hollywood around that time, and he was really a pioneer.
yeah,
And he got nominated for an Oscar for that first movie. That was very powerful, and there was some really powerful cultural historical stuff happening with him in that movie. And a lot of people don't really remember that or realize that. They remember it as, oh, it's a kids karate movie or whatever,
right.
and it is a kids karate movie, and it's an awesome kids karate movie. But but there was also that thing going on. But I mean, for me, Zabka is just so good. I could talk to Zabka for hours, um, and talk about a guy that just didn't get his due. I just think he's just so good, and he's so likable, and he's so vulnerable in an interesting way in that role. Um, uh, that yeah, I just
Yeah,
yeah. There's really no answer.
yeah. I mean,
No
any
other
of them
answer.
would be great, but
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean yeah, somebody from the new show. I don't know. I actually got approached. I got approached by an agent type to do a podcast where they basically wanted, like, quote unquote, an adult in a room. I mean, somebody that I mean, a point guard that would basically
yeah,
dish passes. But there were 3 or 4 of the kids that wanted to do their own podcast, and they were looking for somebody to kind of come and play point guard with them. And for obvious reasons, I was one of the people they reached out to and talked about, because I'm in love with the show. I know the show backwards and forwards. And it wouldn't have been a podcast about the show necessarily. It would have been, about what they were interested in, and
right.
where they were headed, and the other things that were going on in their lives. And I've done some podcasting, obviously, but I don't know that the show ever came together. But that would be interesting. Um, it's the thing is, like, they found great kids, right?
They really
I
did.
mean, yeah. I mean, it's hard to choose one of them, because they're I don't know, they're all so interesting and in their own ways, and I think that they've captured kids today in a really interesting way. I mean, we saw ourselves with the original movies. We saw ourselves in Daniel or Johnny or someone, right? And I think that that's a more complicated question right now.
Yep.
You know, particularly with, I mean, the way representation has changed positively, I think, in TV shows, and you know, that wasn't necessarily, you know, I mean, how many black people are there in the original, you know, Karate Kid franchise, you know, and
Right.
that's a little bit problematic, you know, but I mean, you could say that for, you know, any
Most
number of
any property in the 80s.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so but I don't know, I think they've treated it, you know, in a really interesting way. You know, I'd love to have Stingray on, you know, in my drinking days, I'd love to open up a bottle of whiskey and just, you know, talk shop with Stingray for
So good.
how about you? I mean, what are your two? I'm
I
interested.
mean, Zabka probably would be the original
Yeah.
cast. I and that's no knock on like Ralph, but I feel like Zabka would just be like, yep, we connect, we vibe. Um man, Stingray is a good one.
Yeah.
Um
He's fun.
Stingray would be a really good one.
He's done so much other great work also. Yeah.
I see I go through waves. I don't know, like there are times where like I love the kids in the role of like I'm like
Yeah.
man the perfect, and then I'm like oh I don't like your character. Like
Well, I
season
mean,
one,
that's just kids, right? I mean,
right?
yeah.
I'm like oh you're making dumb decisions, but you're making the decisions that a kid would make, like so
Yeah.
it makes for good TV. But I'm like so it probably would change of like what season. I was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
season one I'd be like Miguel, and then season two I'm like not Miguel.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, I probably I think he took my two. I think it'd be the exact same. Go with those two. They're just good.
Yeah.
I now I'm curious too of like in people, you know, if you're watching this or listening, comment below of who your favorite characters are from that series and stuff because I'm just curious now. Now I'm now I'm worried. I'm figuring out like well, who would I want to?
Yeah. I mean, one of the really cool things that came out of my conversation with Sean on my show on the writer's block was that he and I started drumming up a pitch for, you know, IDW I believe still has the Cobra Kai license in comics, and Sean is obviously like a, you know, a pretty decorated and capable writer himself.
Right.
He's a Emmy winning television writer, and you know has written a lot of, you know, really interesting books. And so sort of on air, you know, we started drumming up a you know a sort of Sean centered you know, Karate Kid spin-off book that I was interested in taking to IDW, um, that Sean and I would write together, you know, a bad boy of karate book, basically, you know, the idea being, okay, well, what has, you know, what was the fallout like after Karate Kid 3,
Yeah.
right? And what has he been doing between, you know, basically between Karate Kid, you know, 3 and his Cobra Kai appearance, right? What did that look like? And what little episodes can we find in there? And yeah, yeah, I was excited about it. And the idea is that we'd write it together, right? And Sean was all in, and so here's the thing, and is you know, I mean, I until very recently had some business going with IDW, and you know, we got pretty far in the conversations on this Cobra Kai thing, but IDW is, you know, IDW has you know, it's a dumpster fire right now. And so it got really complicated, and the other business I had with them got really complicated, and so yeah, it's hard for me to deal with complicated when, you know, I got all this other stuff going on.
Right.
But so I don't know that you will see you know, a bad boy of karate IDW book anytime soon. But it was, you know, we had a great time talking about it,
It'd be so good.
and it was floated, and it was well received, and it was knocked about, and yeah, but I don't know.
Uh there are sometimes where like there's licensed properties when it comes to comics. I'm like, oh, it'd be fun, or but I'm like that would be one where I'm like, oh, give
Yeah.
me.
Well, I mean, it's such an interesting sales, twist also. I mean, it's like, that first Cobra Kai book, it was Johnny's story,
Yeah,
um, and I don't, they're like, oh well, I think they had some issues with how that sold, but it's like, well, it wasn't a great book, so that's why it didn't sell. Like, I don't know if there's anything inherent with Cobra Kai, but imagine if you did that book, Johnny's story, and William Zabka was co-writing it. I mean, that's like,
that's a different sell too. Then,
yeah. So you do the Mike Barnes book, and the guy that played Mike Barnes is co-writing it. I mean, that's
like
pretty
you said, who is also a rare. I mean,
yeah.
he's written two, just two books the last 2 years, and he's written other books before that. Like you said, screenwriting for this daytime. Like, it, yeah, it's like, come on. Well, then we'll just wait for IDW to lose the licensing rights, and then we'll see it somewhere
Yeah.
else then eventually.
Yeah, and so you're doing the promo stuff, and it's not just some like geek writer up there, talking about this book he wrote or whatever. It's you literally have Mike Barnes doing all the promo for it.
Yeah, that sells it. That sells itself right there. Like you've got, I mean, how many
Yep.
times have people bought? I used to do. I remember multiple times. I want to say it's a writer at DC. There's a writer Ralph Macchio at DC or something.
Yeah, he
I
was
was
an
like,
editor. Yeah.
I was like, I didn't realize that. Like the Karate Kid's writing books. I'm like, yo, he's not.
Yeah. That's really funny. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it would have been a good thing for Sean too. I mean, obviously, like anybody who would read that comic book would be a good candidate to read his other books. So anyway, I still have a dream. I mean, I still, when I get asked, it's like, what is your dream comic title to write? And it's not Incredible Hulk or Iron Man or Batman or whatever. It's, I would love to do. I want to do a Karate Kid story.
So, and the people want it too, right? We want it too. We know what you can
Yeah,
bring to it, so we want it.
followed closely by an Axel Foley story, and you know, and on and on and on. But no, I actually there was a time where I was pushing these boulders uphill, where I had a meeting at Universal Television, and you go in there and you talk about TV and all that stuff, but then I always take my, oh well, what I would really like to do is take some of these properties and turn them into you know comic books. Can we start exploring these in comic in the comic world? And I had that conversation at a couple of different places, and definitely got some excitement and some engagement. I had studios sending me titles, and there was um there was talk of I took a few steps in with a Midnight Run comic book that would have been pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't seen Midnight Run with Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin, it's a fucking classic. So stories to be told in that world. You know, Out of Sight, that sort of Elmore Leonard world. We had some conversations on that would have been really interesting, but I think that they kind of wanted to keep it for television. They didn't want to soil it too much.
Yeah.
Um, what were the other ones? There were a couple of really interesting ones. So when I had some business with Joel Silver back in the day, and I would spend some time just around that office, and there existed, you can still find it on online. There was a script. You talk about how people get paid to write movies that never get made. There was a Commando 2 script written that is bonkers, and it ends with John Matrix in at a wedding. He is in a wedding dress with a machine gun, like mowing bad guys down. So it's awesome. It's incredible. Amazing scripts, bonkers. You should find it online and read it. But it never got made. And so I went into Silver, and I'm like, hey, this is sitting on the shelf. Like, let me turn this into a comic book. There's precedent for this,
Yeah.
where there was is it Alien 3? Is that the script that the movie that Dark Horse did? There was a
I think so.
Yeah. So this Alien 3 movie got made. A lot of people didn't like it. There was a script for it before that everybody loved. Everybody wanted to see made. It didn't get made. People were pissed off about it. Well, Dark Horse, some genius at Dark Horse decided, hey, let's take this and let's make a graphic novel. And so the Alien script that everybody loved, that they really wanted to see come to life, came to life as a graphic novel, and everybody fucking, did backflips. I was like, well, Commando 2's sitting there. Let me do the same thing with Commando 2. Let me write a love poem to Commando 2 in comic form. And I mean, the people at Silver were going to sign off on it. And then we hit some studio bumps, and that didn't work. There is an original Shane Black script for Lethal Weapon 2 that is incredible. And the studio got a hold of it, and it was rewritten, and it was kind of watered down. And it's kind of one of the things that drives Shane Black nuts, is that his Lethal Weapon 2 never got made.
Yeah.
And so, well, here's the thing: is that according to Writers Guild rules, stipulate that the writer holds on to a lot of publishing rights. And so there's a way where maybe Shane could kind of do it on his own. And so we started having a lot of conversations with Shane's people, and it turned into where messaging, meaning me and my representation, were messaging back and forth with Shane's people, and I'm sort of laying out my vision and how it would work and all of these things, and then suddenly Shane drops out of the fucking sky into the email chain. He had been BCC'd the entire time, and starts replying to everything. I'm really excited about this. Let's make this work. And so Shane was into it. Shane basically, bought my pitch, hook, line, and sinker. And then again, studio issues, and so that didn't happen. And so there are these things that I would really love to do in comics that I think people would really respond to.
Like you said, there's a precedent for it, though, of the others, and they just they just did the run in the summer of the Batman '89, continuing the story of Tim Burton's version.
Yeah, that's great.
I know people don't like the Schumacher Batmans. I did. Like, give me the third Schumacher script that he wrote, of all of them in Arkham Asylum, and connecting the original movies with it. Like,
that's great. Yeah.
But that's the way to do it. So, well, Rylend, I know we could talk about movies and TV and everything so much. But as we're closing up here, so I can not get yelled at by my wife to finish making dinner.
My daughter's gonna pop back in here in 5 minutes anyway. So,
let's wrap up by book Kickstarter. Where can people go? When's the Kickstarter drop?
Yeah. So, I think by the time this airs, it will be live. We go live on March 6th. That is a Monday. The book is called The Jump. It is a kick you in the teeth paranoid thriller set in the world of astral projection. As I said before, it is Inception meets The Bourne Identity if it were dripping with macabre, and directed by David Fincher. It is a badass, wild ride. This is the issue 1 cover. Issues 1 through 3 will be available during the campaign. The art is done by Fabio Alves and Edson Ferreira as the colorist. They were nominated for Ringo Awards for probably my greatest effort, Banjax. Some people may argue with that, but you should pick that up. That's available in fine comic shops everywhere also. But yeah, check out The Jump. I mean, The Jump is The Jump is probably the best thing I've done in comics. It's just a really wild world. It's an original idea. It's a sort of sci-fi joint that you haven't seen. So go check it out. Great rewards. People have loved the book. It's been really well reviewed. Hop on the Kickstarter. If again, just go to Kickstarter, search The Jump, Rylend Grant. You can go to bit.ly/The Jump 3, the number 3. And that'll take you right to it also. But you're gonna love it if you haven't read it already. Check it out. Give it a chance.
It's so good, gang. And I'll have links to Rylend's all his socials below, as well as to the Kickstarter and things like that. And I'm assuming if people start following you on social media and they start seeing some of these posts that you make about movies and stuff, they can kind of assume like that those are stuff like, you know, because I saw you posting a lot about the Emil movie and stuff of there can kind of follow along and see where they're at in production and where it's moving along then and see some of that stuff we talked about.
Yeah. Those will be out later this year. Yeah, the Emil Hirsch movie is called State of Consciousness. It should be out later this year, and in theaters. I mean, we're still you know, that just we just sold that, you know, that was an independently made movie, but we just sold that to a distributor. That's with Lionsgate, so we'll figure out when that's going to go. And that might be a Netflix thing, you know. You just kind of never know now. There's not a lot of
Right.
theater stuff at this point.
Yep.
So probably coming to a streamer near you. And yeah, same thing with the Fernando Trevo movie with Matt Dillon is called Haunted Heart. That was the Spanish rights were pre-sold to Netflix, so pretty good chance that that ends up on Netflix in the United States also. Netflix original and all that. And then yeah, we'll you know, on the TV show front, we'll I don't know, we'll know in a couple of weeks what network we're going with, but coming
Nice.
soon to Netflix or Peacock or Apple TV or Stars, or you know, we'll
Something.
see.
So, Rylan, man,
Yep.
thank you again so much. It's been a blast. I just love talking with you about comics, but just more about just pop culture and life. It's a lot of fun to hear and find out about your karate journey. Like it's so good. So, and this is why I'm friends with you now. So if we ever hang out, no one's gonna mess with me. I'm like,
Yeah.
gotta deal with Ryland.
Karate chop somebody. Yeah.
So, well, gang, with
So,
that being said, hopefully you check out the links. Go check out The Jump, please. It's fantastic. I love it, and it's not just because I'm in a small one panel an issue one. I love it because it's really good stuff. But gang,
you're actually on the Kickstarter page. You are the example when it's like, you know, you can have yourself drawn into the book. That's one of the cool rewards, and you are the example. It's like, hey,
it's
so you send us this picture, and this is how you end up in the comic book. And so
it
there's,
works.
yeah,
It
there
works,
is
gang.
the bearded comic bro. So
It's there. So, oh man. But with that being said, hopefully you all can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.